It was just me doing all the before you buy videos, and I reviewed the game, and now I was a big fan. I've been waiting for this follow-up for a long time, so let's talk about it. So, we've been playing a review copy, and this footage has been captured on Xbox Series X. The game is also on Steam, and this video is as spoiler-free as I can possibly make it. There's stuff in here, you can't really avoid it in a narrative game, but I don't spoil big story beats or show like the last half of the game or anything like that. So to cut right to the chase, so nobody misinterprets anything, I like this game, but I didn't really love it anywhere near as much as I enjoyed the original. Even though the original did have flaws, it felt like a full meal. Hellblade 2 has some incredible moments, some cool action, and obviously great visuals, but I found it a bit unfulfilling from a narrative and gameplay standpoint. It doesn't build on the gameplay much from the original, which, can be fine. I don't need a sequel to become something it shouldn't be, but some combat and puzzle stuff actually feels like a step backwards. So, for two types of people. Number one, if you didn't like the first game, you're not going to like this one. If you dismissed it as a walking simulator, well, yep, there's actually more walking in this one. But if you're like me, and you like the original game, flaws and all, I still think you should give this one a shot at some point. It was nice just to be back in the character's shoes, and they didn't really skip a beat here. And the story stuff is extremely subjective. I'll talk about that more later on. It might hit you harder than it hit me, but yeah. So, without spoiling anything, not too long after the first game, some slavers come upon SENUA'S home, and she sets out to find them at the source and stop it, right the wrongs, leading her to a big adventure in Iceland. She's still living with psychosis, voices in her head that serve as everything: encouragement, doubt, reactions, and some storytelling stuff. It's a much more social affair than the previous game. You're still fighting off like horrifying creatures of the mind, but also men. Along with that, this means that there are more active characters in the story. The original Hellblade was very intimate and solitary, but this one introduces characters that come along the adventure. I was a little worried, but it pretty much works. Thankfully, the game does a good job blurring the lines between what is real and what isn't, while other actual people are walking around with their own story beats and arcs, without spoiling anything. Some of it is very good, and what helps is that now you're not just looking at this beautifully rendered and artfully portrayed and acted SENUA. You have other characters as well, and it really shows that Ninja Theory just gets this. They understand the performance. They understand translating a performance to the game. They've been doing it forever. They've been doing it even before Hellblade, and they're still really crushing it and pushing this forward. And the game feels extremely similar to the last game in some aspects. The eerie but great 3D audio, the presentation, the atmosphere, like I said, the performance of the lead actress, and also playing the game. You're walking around, you're listening to the voices in your head, you're pressing forward, and occasionally solving puzzles or engaging in combat. I thought the puzzles in the last game started to get a little repetitive towards the end, and what they did here is seemingly cut back on them. You're still identifying shapes in the environment to open up a blocked area, but it's only occasionally. And the visual puzzles are just much easier this time around. There's also a new spin on puzzles involving like changing the environment, and these are also painfully easy. A lot of it just makes you feel less involved than last time around, which I consider a step backwards. Again, I didn't need Hellblade 2 to turn into an RPG or an open world game. I want them to make what they want to make, but I want to be engaged as a player. And there are long sequences here where you're just pushing up on the joystick to continue a long cutscene of SENUA just like crawling or climbing without even much emotional or story significance or anything really to it. And then when you finally get to a cool puzzle, most of the time it's just not very interesting. And I found that to be a disappointment. On the combat front, things feel similar, but also different. So let me explain. Combat is still very simple and deliberate, all about timing dodges, blocks, parries, and basic strikes with a special focus ability thing to slow down time and save you in a pinch. That is almost exactly all the same here, but there are some improvements. Some cooler enemy types are really fun to square up against, and some dudes will throw things at you, making for like cool dodge moments, or, you know, smacking it away with your sword like Aragorn in the Fellowship during that one part. A big change though is that enemy encounters are all one-on-one. Like, you square up against like one enemy at a time, not struggling to deal with multiple and, like, you know, enemies hitting you in the back. Along with that, the parry window is shorter, and enemy strike timings are a bit harder to read, so it can actually be a bit challenging here and there. I still only died a few times during my playthrough because the game is generous, but it still just felt like a tougher, desperate struggle. Having just replayed the previous game, I had a hard time getting the timings down this time around. Like, I whiffed parry timings consistently through almost the entire game, and I just couldn't get the feeling quite right. I know I'm not the best at video games, I will always be the first to admit that, but I don't know. In the original game, it was far too easy, and then here, some of it just feels a little inconsistent. Still, even with that, every encounter was fun. There's more quality over quantity here. You know, finishers are brutal and unique. A lot of the encounters felt really unique, and not just rinse and repeat, which is a really nice upgrade from the original game. The only thing that got a little predictable feeling was the game transitioning you from fighting one character and then another right after. So like, you'll kill an enemy with a finisher, and then it happens every time. Like, an enemy is gonna grab you from behind, spin you around, and then you fight them next. You know, every situation is a little different, and they do get creative with it, but like, you always see it coming. Regardless, I still think the fights are cool, and there's one or two scenes in particular that are extremely memorable from obviously a visual standpoint, but also just the motion capture, choreography, and movement, character models, and scene transitioning going on. Like, the craftsmanship here, even if you're vaguely interested in how video games are made, is really, really impressive, man. And yeah, the visuals on display here are nothing short of incredible. Even at 30 frames per second on the console version, I was totally blown away by how good it looked. From the landscapes of Iceland to the look on the characters' faces, the detail is impressive. From like the griminess to the feel of the enemies you square up against. You know, fight moments are more interesting because it looks like a real tall, imposing person or monster man is like actually standing in front of you. The lighting, all that is just working wonders here. Blood and mud flies, swords flash and clash, and I couldn't help but take advantage of a solid photo mode that you can bring up instantly at any point. It was actually a big part of the fun I had with this game. Like, to the point where capturing footage for the game, like, I had to edit around the amount of times mid-battle or like mid-finishing move, I would just whip out the camera mode and just go absolutely nuts. It's cool. If you like that stuff, you're gonna really love it here. And speaking of fun, you know, the game, like I said, has some really big moments that make up for some of the slower, more tedious feeling ones from a gameplay perspective. The memorable moments here are worth the journey, in my opinion. The only problem is that just as things really start to get interesting and pick up, the game ends. In terms of criticism, that can sound like a compliment, like I wanted more. But for me here, like, it just felt cut a bit short. Without spoiling anything, there is a resolution, but it felt like it came up very quickly, and I really could have used another hour or so in this world and with these characters. The game can be finished in like 5.5, 6 hours, and actually felt shorter. Like, the journey didn't feel as massive as the original game, and even that game was brief. It felt short because I was unfulfilled by the end. Now, this part is extremely subjective. Everybody's gonna respond to a story differently. Look at The Last of Us Part 2. But like, here, I just didn't take away as much from the story as I did with the previous game, which is ultimately why I was such a fan of that one. Like, this game feels like a middle chapter of sorts, which can be fine, but one that is painfully cut short. I wanted to get to know the characters a little bit more that they spent so much time introducing, and I honestly wanted more time with Senua because all these other characters got some time in the sun. It's not often that I get to the end credits and I go, oh, wait, that's it? And that happened here, and I can't deny that feeling. It wasn't like an abrupt surprise ending or anything like that. It just like ramped up and ended real quick. I like what Senua learned and accomplished, but it didn't feel as earned as it could have. It's hard to go into that more without spoiling anything, so yeah. When you finish the game, you can actually replay the game with a different narrator. One of the other key characters in the game, like you can select and have them do narrative voiceover with their own perspectives on the story. Senua still is going to like have her voices in her head, of course, like the normal game goes on, but getting some extra bits here and there narratively from other characters does seem valuable. I finished the game and then I loaded this up just to see how it works in the intro, and I do really like it. I really want to do another playthrough anyway, just to like really absorb the story for what it is. But with that, it's worth noting that the game does have chapter select when you finish, and you can do the narrator thing by selecting chapters as well. Other than the same style of lore collectibles that was in the previous game, and there's not as many of them here, that's really about it in this package. So again, I think if you're a fan of the original Hellblade, there is enough to like here, and I still think you should see it through, even though I had my complaints. It's short, so you don't have too much to lose, at least in terms of time spent. I really liked getting back into the Hellblade world and feel, and there are some moments I'm gonna remember for a long time here. But I just really wanted a little bit more. I know what kind of games they make. I know it was going to be short, but I didn't expect it to quite feel like this. But hey, that's it before you buy. You know how this goes by now. I give you some pros, some cons, and some long, rambling personal opinions. So now I want to hear yours. This review is going live the day that the game has dropped, so chances are some of you did jump into it. So as you're getting through it, or once you finish it, let me know what you think. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Am I being overly critical? I don't know. I've talked to some people that really enjoyed this more than me. I talked to some people that like it less than me. So let me know where you're at. Let's talk anything with Hellblade down in the comments. I would love to hear from you. We'll be in the comments, but you can always find me and yell at me directly on Twitter, Instagram, and just look on YouTube, Jake Baldino. That's where you can find me. But thank you guys for listening. Clicking the like button does help us if this video helped you out at all. And either way, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
Senua, you just have to submit to me. Let me mold you, shape you.
Like, comment, and subscribe.